Welcome to our seminar on the energy transition, Brazil and Norway towards the energy future. My name is Stian. I'm the Managing Director of BNCC, and we have the pleasure of producing this seminar for you together with Innovation Norway. Would you like to say some words?
Yes, sure. And I'm also really happy to be here today and happy to see so many people. I guess we have people from Brazil on streaming, so I guess we have to say good morning to the people in Brazil and good afternoon to you people here. My name is Per Niederbach. I'm head of Trade and Investment Promotion in Innovation Norway. Innovation Norway is one of the major business support organizations in Norway. We support both entrepreneurs and larger companies with financing and networks and so on. And we are present in Norway, but also have an office in Brazil, in Rio. And I guess that's why we're also here. So together with the Chamber of Commerce, the Brazilian Norwegian, and the embassy and companies in general, we are Team Norway out there and try to promote Brazil, the market, and help companies grow in the market and so on. So I guess it has never been more important to put this item as we have today on the agenda, if we look at what's happening around us. And despite huge efforts to reduce, especially CO2 emissions, we can still see that the emissions are rising and we have problems. And I guess, especially in Brazil, you can notice those changes in the weather and in the climate, and we also see it here in Norway. So I guess that's why we also are here together, and I believe that we will not be able to solve these problems alone. We have to work together. We have to unite both industry, governments, researchers, as you do or as we do today. So that's really good. I'm really, as I said, happy to be here, and this seminar today has to be communicated directly or connected directly to our main event in Brazil every year, and that's the 3-day November conference in Rio. So I really look forward to the presentations today and the discussions, and in Rio in November, of course, where both countries will come together and do so every year. So good luck with the seminar, and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to welcome Raquel Araújo to the stage, who will be our moderator today, and she will guide us through this seminar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And bom dia para os que estão no Brasil, and good afternoon for those here in Oslo. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to kick off the debates today. I would like to call to the stage Sverre Alvik, Vice President of Energy Transition Outlook from the DNV. Please join me here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please take a seat. Thank you. And we also have Leandro Albuquerque, his special advisor within the Energy Transition Secretariat in the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Brazil, that will be joining us online. Thank you for all. Okay, so we all know the target: keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius and pursue efforts to 1.5. However, as well put by the chief analyst of Nordea Bank, Tina Magret, on a recent interview, and I quote, "5 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the green transition and how we are starting to see the oil and gas sunset. Then COVID happened, then the war in Ukraine, and now you don't see it anymore. The focus has turned to energy security. Natural floods are more common now, and national disasters are over. We are all aware of the devastating news happening in the south of Brazil, on the state of Rio Grande do Sul. However, on the other note, We also heard the economists some weeks ago issuing a 15.5 drop on carbon, mentioning a 15.5 drop on carbon emissions in Europe. And according to IEA, the world added 50% of more renewable capacity in 2023 than in 2022. So, Sverre, can you take us through this context of energy transition before we kick off debates today?
I can give it a go. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Today, we will talk about the global transition, but we'll also talk about and concentrate on what's happening in Brazil. And DNV is presenting an energy transition outlook every year. I'll give you one slide from that, and then I'll go a little bit more into Brazil and ending up a little bit more with technologies. When we presented this some months ago, we used the somewhat provocative statement that the energy transition is still in the starting blocks. Or we even said, has still not started on a global scale. Yes, there was record installation of renewable energy last year, but it's also higher emissions than ever due to higher fossil fuel use. And energy security has moved to the very top of the agenda. And we see that the geopolitical development, protectionism is rising, reshoring, homeshoring, localizing of supply chain are even more important to most politicians. Then we see a lot is happening on the policy side. Progressive policies, we have asked for that on the other side of the Atlantic for many years. Now we've got it. What does that mean? That means that there is a competition to be green, which is good. But what does that make for Brazil and Latin American and similar countries if China, Europe, and US is competing on being greenest? Are they lagging behind? Yes and no. Come back to that. And on the technology side, there is very different progress on the different technologies, as I'll show you. The transition is very different if you sit in Norway, in Algeria, in Brazil, or wherever you are. We take that into account by modeling the transition in 10 different regions. And on a global scale, we are not on track to 1.5 degrees. On the contrary, DNV says we're on our way towards a 2.2 degree future with the most likely developments. That's much better than the business as usual setting or 3 or 4 degrees we would have by doing nothing, but it's far from the Paris Accord. What about Latin America? Latin America is a vast continent from, in our model, from Mexico down to Tierra del Fuego, and it's growing, but it's growing more modestly than some of the other regions. If you're comparing with the vast population growth of Africa or the vast economic growth of some of the Asian countries, it's a little slower in Latin America. But there are some great opportunities, and Brazil is in the forefront. Brazil is close to half or 30% of this continent. And what we see from the developments in energy consumption, in electricity buildup in the continent is very representative and influenced by what's happening in Brazil. And as you see here, the energy use is still dominated by oil and gas. More than half of the energy used is still oil and gas, in spite of a large biofuel, a large hydropower reserve. But electricity is relatively small. It's less than 20% of the energy use today, growing to about 30% of the energy use in 2050. And electricity is the part of the energy source which is greening fast. And you see here on the bottom page, it's the addition of solar and wind who's making the electricity green, adding to the present large hydropower reserve. But overall, And that's the conundrum and also the strategy of Brazilian government. They also want to grow oil and gas. It's a big source of income for the country. And we know what especially the oil fields offshore Brazil is making of revenue. And I think offshore wind is trailing quite far behind. So what are the most important factors that influence the transition as we see it today? Well, we have the technology side, we have the economy, we have the policy and the geopolicy combined, and then we have behavioral change. The latter is also where least things are happening. And then we cannot see Brazil's transition in isolation, because what's happening there is very dependent on what's happening in the rest of the world. The influence also go the other way around, but first and foremost, what's happening on the costs of technologies based on what's happening in China, what's happening with the demand for oil and gas globally, driven by Middle East, North Europe, etc., is extremely important for what's happening in Brazil. And then I might provoke you a little, but I promised to give a little bit of view of the different type of technologies and maturity. And this is something we will return to today on these different technologies. Yeah. So it's very different. You see here with green, you have solar, wind, and batteries. They are leading the transition. They're already competitive. Mostly without subsidies, they can compete. Solar and wind is the cheapest form of new electricity in most places in the world. Electric vehicles is to an increasing degree competing on equal level with ICEs. And the development is going fast and in the right direction. Then you have the other new technologies with ammonia, hydrogen, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage. They're also moving, but they need help to move because they are not competitive with incumbent technologies without help. Advanced biofuel, hydrogen, will always be expensive comparing it to oil, but they should compete with other low-carbon sources, and then they're not. But they have a different set of development and need a different set of policies. The existing technologies, green technologies, hydropower, bioenergy, nuclear, little provocative, we could say they're not moving. They're there, they exist, you compete with them, but they're not the revolution of the new thing. They're solid and big and mostly stable. And finally, nuclear, maybe. It has a very long way to go from the small modular reactors until that is competitive, not only with the present wind and solar, but with the future wind and solar. And we are only modestly optimistic on that behalf. But keep this type of technologies development in mind, that the different technologies have different roles, different maturity stage, and they need different types of policies in order to scale. And especially those with blue here, they need a lot of help in order to move off the ground. Yeah. I think I end there.
Yes, because we're going to be discussing a lot about all of those topics that you highlighted throughout the day today. Yeah. And we are already behind. So I was given a very tough task of keeping everybody on time. But thank you very much, Sveta. Before we continue, because you mentioned a lot about the Brazilian reality and still use of oil and gas, before we move to Brazil to hear from the Special Secretary, we are going to please invite you to sit down so we can watch a short video on the Brazilian strategy for energy transition.
Em novembro de 2024. Muito obrigado.
Martelo batido. Agora chegou a vez do Brasil. É o momento de mostrarmos ao mundo a nossa capacidade de gerar energia limpa e renovável. De apontar para o mundo um caminho mais sustentável e com novas oportunidades. A condução do G20 pelo Brasil vai reforçar o nosso protagonismo na transição energética global.
O G20 será uma grande oportunidade para que no Brasil, para que a transição energética seja vista pelo mundo.
Liderados pelo presidente Lula, vamos apresentar ao mundo o potencial do Brasil para garantir uma transição energética justa, inclusiva e equilibrada. Isso é, mais oportunidades para brasileiras e brasileiros. Isso é mais sustentabilidade para cuidar do planeta. Com nossas políticas e a parceria com o setor privado, já conseguimos atrair mais investimentos para o Brasil, com o objetivo de ampliar a pesquisa, inovação e desenvolvimento de um novo modelo sustentável de geração de energia. Na COP28, em Dubai, impulsionamos o compromisso com a transição energética nas negociações climáticas. No Fórum Econômico Mundial, o Brasil se colocou mais uma vez como protagonista na transição energética, apresentando ações e programas voltados para a descarbonização da matriz energética de vários setores, como é o caso dos transportes, com o Programa Nacional do Hidrogênio e do Combustível do Futuro. Agora, com os olhos do planeta voltados para o Brasil, reforçaremos a nossa dedicação para contribuir com a transição energética mundial, estimulando uma atuação conjunta dos países. De mãos dadas, vamos construir um futuro próspero e verde. Vem com a gente! Ministério de Minas e Energia, Governo Federal. Brasil, União e Reconstrução.
Very good. So that gave us the backdrop for our next speaker today, which is Leandro Albuquerque, joining us all the way from Brasília. Let's see if yes. Bom dia, Leandro. Bom dia.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yes, thank you for being here with us today. I really appreciated that. So, can you please give us some details on what we just saw about the Brazilian government plans on energy transition and the role within the G20?
Of course. Thank you very much for the invitation to the Brazilian and Norwegian Chamber of Commerce and Innovation Norway. For Brazil, you already know we've been together in other events. This relation is very strategic. We share some common interests, especially in the energy subjects. So energy transition is in the core of the main challenges we face as an international community, and the reduction of emissions is only possible if all countries are engaged in these efforts. And we need, for sure, to act decisively and really fast. We cannot wait for the any agreements. We have to take this action at the present moment. So for this, with this objective, with this vision, the Brazilian priorities, the key priorities on the G20's energy transitions working group were elected 3 priorities. Of course, with the indissociable two main top priorities established by President Lula, there is fight against climate change and fight against poverty and inequality. But for the energy transitions working group, we are proposing these 3 priorities. The first one is to accelerating financing for energy transitions, particularly in the emerging markets and developing economies. Despite significant investments, the gap between current funding levels and the requirements for achieving net zero emissions by 2050 remains substantial. So to bridge this gap, we must catalyze both public and private resources, recognizing the disproportionately high costs of financing for developed economies, particularly in low-income countries. In Brazil, for instance, we have some currency issues that lead the cost of finance to a higher levels, and this is something we want to discuss and to address in the first priority, this priority for accelerating financing for energy transition. The second priority is the social dimension of energy transition. Strengthening the coordination, the consideration of social dimension of energy transition for a just and inclusive process. The goal here is to ensure that our countries and partners institutions in G20 are not overlooking relevant aspects of energy transition by framing guiding principles and shaping an energy transition that must be just and inclusive. The third priority we are discussing and will be the subject of the last of the three presence meetings we are going to have here in Brazil this year is sustainable fuels. And by sustainable fuels, we are not restricting to biofuels, but to a variety of different e-fuels and hydrogen, ammonia, and other fuels. And this is very important, especially after the agreements on COP28 on transition away from fossil fuels and implementing this goal of transitioning away from fossil fuels will require a competitive low carbon alternatives. Electrification and energy efficiency for sure have a relevant role in this process, but we must also address the development of markets for sustainable fuels by setting some some patterns, some common grounds on sustainable criteria for these sustainable fuels, low emission hydrogen, and we'd like to highlight that some of these solutions are dropping in already ready to be used. So a very important tool for reaching these net zero scenarios we are designing. So I would like also in this subject to highlight the importance of green corridors here, both maritime and maritime navigation, aviation, and to deploy this strategy of introduce low carbon fuels and decarbonization and decarbonizing. One of the most difficult, hard to abate sector, there is transport. And I see here many common grounds and interests from Brazil and Norway to exploring this relation, both public and private, on these corridors, green corridors, for sure, is something that can be after put in deployment in other different corridors. My mission wants to give some detail on this Brazilian presidency. So, okay, I believe my time is running out.
And I apologize for that, Leandro. But thank you so much. Thanks, because you touched base in some of the issues that we will be discussing here today. As you know, we are having 4 panels, and some of those panels will cover also sustainable fuels. I would like to thank you once again for joining us and tuning in. And considering that I have already somebody looking at me saying we need to speed up because there are the next panel on, I apologize for everybody here on the stage and from you. And thank you, Leandro, thank you, Zvira. And I'm going to call here to start our first panel that we'll be discussing about solar, offshore wind, and hybrid plants. Here on the stage, Emil Nilsson, Chief Transaction Officer from Hydro Rein. Please join me here on the stage. And also Moana Siemens, Research Scientist from SINTEF. As you know, our seminars is research-based, science and realism. Please take a place. So we are going to having here throughout the panels SINTEF and EPE to be having a conversation with our speakers. Joining us online, I would like to call Alberto Gambarcota, our Vice President of Business Development from SCATEC. Also, Alex Gasparetto, Offshore Wind Business Development Manager for Petrobras, and Heloísa Borges, Director for Oil, Natural Gas, and Biofuels Studies from EPE Brazil. They will be joining us online, but meanwhile, we can kick off. So, Emil, we are here on the task of discussing solar, and thank you, on discussing solar and offshore wind and hybrid plants. Can you kick off for us seeing how do you see this technologies contributing so far for the energy transition?
Yeah, so I think it's quite obvious that solar and wind will play a major role in the energy transition. As you probably know, cost of solar and wind has fallen dramatically over the last 10-15 years. There's been some challenges on the wind side recently with quite some cost increases since COVID, actually up like 20% or something like that. We can come back to that on the challenges, but the general picture I think is that solar and wind, they are profitable without subsidies in most regions, and that's kind of a huge step forward, I think, for that technology, for those technologies. However, looking ahead, I think they need to be playing a more integrated role on together with storage, as the grid and in particular will be unstable, more and more unstable. But I can give one example of what we have done in hydro, Rein and hydro with hybrid plants. So in Brazil, we are, as we speak, constructing a huge hybrid wind and solar park. And that park will deliver power to hydro's facilities in northern Brazil. We have a long-term PPA there, and we raised debt financing on the back of that. And that's really triggering a big project, the PPA we have with hydro.
Together with this, yeah, very good. Very good. I'm having here, so that's like some key opportunities for solar, and that's great. Online with us, we have Alberto Gambarcota from SCATEC. Hello, Alberto is joining us from South Africa. And
hello, good afternoon, everyone.
And before anybody asks me, Raquel, but that's a Brazilian Norwegian Chamber of Commerce, what Alberto is dining from South Africa, I will jump right in. The Brazilian government, we are having a capacity auction on the second semester this year. So we are discussing regulations currently on how to include BESS together with solar and other technologies. So we were asked to be showcasing, and me as an employee for SCATEC, to be showcasing our example in South Africa as one of the biggest hybrid plants with 225 megawatts of batteries that you see just there behind Alberto on the screen. So please, Alberto, can you explain a little bit, how do you see that Kenhardt was contributed to the energy security and transition of South Africa? Because then maybe the Brazilian government and us, we can drive some conclusions from that as well.
Thanks, Raquel. Yes, I can definitely say a couple of words about the power plant's specifics and how this contributed to the energy security in South Africa in the first place. So I think what's important to keep in context is just the energy mix for South Africa. It's about 80% at the moment on coal. And the generation infrastructure is not that advanced. Now, the government wanted to end load shedding. And what was the quickest way to do it in an emergency procurement round is to go out, to be technology agnostic and let technologies compete. And that's when this power plant was conceived. Is there, and the thinking was, is there a chance for solar plus battery energy storage to actually compete with other technologies on a base load level? And the answer is yes. So that's how this power plant, which is about 540 megawatt of PV plus, as you said, 225 megawatt of BESS, came to life. It's about $1 billion investment, thousands of jobs during construction, and a great story about local content, industrialization opportunity, as well as energy security. There is a case to be made in South Africa about BESS becoming more and more important in general in hybrid configuration on a standalone basis in order to enhance and make available more grid capacity, which is a big constraint that we have at the moment, as well as having it coupled with wind plus solar plus BESS. This is creating a lot of opportunities for private companies. Those are entering into private PPAs with this type of hybrid power plants to decarbonize their footprint, of course, as well as contributing to what South Africa at the moment needs the most, which is electricity on the grid. So BESS coupled with renewables, definitely in South Africa is a success story in terms of energy security and enabling industrialization as well.
Very good. Thank you. And I think you also mentioned before when we were discussing, you also mentioned the relevance of corporate PPAs as well for this, right, Emil? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's a key trigger, and especially in Brazil now with such a weak power market, the merchant markets, I think it will be challenging for an investor actually to take investment decision on a new wind or solar park without the long-term PPA. And especially if you have it in USD, that will enable a USD financing and attract a completely different and bigger pool of investors for that market.
Very good. Let's see if we can be joined online as well with Alec Gasparetto from Petrobras. Let's see if we can have him online before we jump into the challenges, because we're discussing here about some opportunities. And Alex, he's responsible for offshore wind in Petrobras. Let's see if we can have him online so we can...
Yeah. Hello, morning.
Yes. Hello, Alex. Thanks for being there with us. So, can you go on with us explaining a little bit about Petrobras just announced it, like it was, I think today I read on the news that it was Jean Paul Prates was very vocal about the need of increasing like the share of renewables within Petrobras. So could you please discuss a little bit about Petrobras plans and how does it see offshore wind as an opportunity within the energy transition journey of Brazil?
Yeah, of course. As you may know, Petrobras is focused on your strategic plan on renewables since last year. So we are starting with onshore and looking for offshore wind as an opportunity for energy transition in Brazil. We see offshore wind as a key technology for energy transition because of its ability to deliver clean energy on a large scale. Of course, in Brazil, we still have an important potential to be explored onshore with significantly lower generation costs than offshore. And however, offshore wind can deliver some benefits to the Brazilian electricity system that onshore wind cannot. For example, adding a large load of energy close to the country's consumption center, bringing savings with the expansion of the transmission system and reduction of electrical losses. In addition, only offshore wind will be able to add sufficient amount of capacity to the system to meet future demand for green hydrogen production. Brazil is positioning itself as a future supplier of green hydrogen, and offshore wind will be necessary to reach this the demand for green hydrogen. However, we see that we still need a further reduction in the cost of offshore wind generation for this hydrogen production to become viable. So we are looking to offshore wind as an opportunity for a medium and long term here in Brazil. Okay, very good. You're actually touching base in some of the challenges as well, Mon. I think that you've been, I think you wanted to, we are discussing some of the questions when it comes to challenges as well, and then we can jump to those.
What you talk about, like the offshore, I think that we have a lot of, in Brazil, there's a lot of experience with onshore wind, and there's like some lessons learned there. But offshore is a very new market with a lot of challenges, and especially a lot of bottlenecks as well. So where do you see there's like the main bottlenecks for upscaling or the large adoption of offshore, for example, with infrastructure, with transport, human resources, energy grid, and so on?
Is that to Alex and then to Emil? We do Alex first and then Emil. Okay. Okay. Yeah, of course we would need to solve many challenges for offshore business to become viable in Brazil. And at this moment, we still having a discussion of our offshore wind bill, which is in its final stage of approval. So we think that this challenge will overcome in the first half of 2024. But our country will need considerable investments in supply chain and logistics
port adaptations will be necessary, and the local supply chain will need investments to be able to meet the demand for the installation of wind farms in a competitive way. So we need to see the market in Brazil, how will be developed, and maybe we will need a pipeline of projects that could incentivize the demand and incentivize the supply chain suppliers.
That's a good point, because Emil, you have, sorry to interrupt, Alex, but you have operations on onshore wind in Brazil, and you have some operations of offshore here in Europe, right?
No, actually,
or onshore as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. Onshore, always. Okay, so
onshore so far. So we are sitting a bit on the sideline on the offshore side as of now. But
okay, but do you agree with some of the challenges that you're saying?
Absolutely. I think if you just look at the foundations for an offshore structure, and just for example floating offshore, which is most relevant for Norway, they are huge. I don't think we have the ports actually available to handle those huge structures today. So there are significant challenges, and also just look at the basic the cost of doing offshore structures. It's probably 2, 3, 4 times an onshore structure. But of course there are a lot of good things about offshore. You don't see them, and you don't need the same amount of land, and you can, as was mentioned, you can build them close to the mountain and so on. So I think in the future, we really believe in it for the longer run. But as of now, we have stayed a bit on the sideline on offshore side.
Very good.
Can I jump in?
Yes. Hello.
Eloisa here.
Hey, Eloisa.
Hi, Eloisa.
Thank you. Thank you for jumping in.
I just listening to everybody. I think there's a common trend both in batteries and offshore wind that I would like to point out, which is the time to scale up technology. If we look on the time of time needed to scale up technology supplies from concept to commercialization, there's a lot going on. There's a long time. Like the first time we started thinking about floating offshore wind was in the 70s, actually, and batteries. We have been researching batteries for a while right now, and there's a risk on accelerating the time frame, and I would like to understand, because nobody mentioned the sheer risk of trying to accelerate technology development, and I think there's a clear need for renewables in the future, and some of the technologies we have been researching for a while, but I would like to listen a little bit more on the challenge of scaling up, on the size, on the amount of energy that we would need, and the time frame to do that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Emilio, can you take that? Meanwhile, I would try to see if Alberto can also jump in online, so he can also take on that.
Yeah, I think on scaling, we have probably reached the maximum size of an onshore turbine, because you can only make them so big to not disturb people and animals around the society. So that's more, I think, more to fine-tune the technologies and blades and that side. I think solar, that technology is just improving year by year. It's just immense, so it's just to follow it. I think looking a bit longer term, I mentioned it in the beginning, but I think really the challenge will be how to handle the intermittent nature of the both solar and wind production, because it makes the grid unstable. And we have already seen in Europe, for example, in Germany, they are starting to curtail offshore wind production, which is could have quite some impact on the ability and willingness to invest in that kind of technology. So I think scaling would be, I'm not that worried on batteries. I think there's a huge push for batteries investment and R&D as well. Probably scaling is on offshore, probably that's where we see the scale effects. And of course there we need some time to test and to see projects up and running, to see how that plays out. But that's probably where the scale risk is biggest for the time being.
Yeah, very good.
So yes, just jumping in on batteries here, and I think for batteries we need to consider that the power applications, like large-scale utility power plants, and you see more and more of this. KNR to this project was one of the biggest worldwide when it was conceived and awarded a couple of years ago. And now we see projects that are much bigger. As Emil was pointing out already, I think that the scalability of BESS is probably less of a concern compared to what you have on offshore wind, for instance. And the reason I'm saying this is that for BESS, you also have the electric vehicle industry, which is driving a lot of the innovation on the battery storage side of things. Now, probably for BESS, what you may see as potential threat there is more the fact that the processing capabilities of lithium and the battery manufacturing is again concentrated in a few countries worldwide. Yeah. So again, it's a bit of more of a security of supply of batteries in the future. So that's where you may want to look into where in the world are batteries coming from and what kind of disruptions we may face, as we have seen in the past, if something happens worldwide. So the worldwide volatility may impact the scalability of BESS more than anything else.
I think that's such a hype topic that Stian probably it's a suggestion for our next event, because Norway has been trying to do this these clusters, these battery clusters on the north and on the south of Norway, and I've already was contacted by the government of Brazil as well to actually do missions so they can come over here and discuss a little bit what's going on. So yeah, thanks for touching base on this. And Alberto, I know that you're on the rush, but thank you so much for dialing in. And discussing with us about the challenges as well and the opportunities of BESS plus solar.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Alex, I think would you like to take that on as well? Some of the challenges that we are just wrapping up here, the comments when it comes to offshore wind.
Relating to scale up.
Yeah.
The business. Yeah. I only can add that scale is the main factor that could bring the costs of energy production lower than we have, and then that we need. The industry has shown in the past years that it's going up to getting more bigger equipments that could bring scale for the business. So I think we are on the way in offshoring to achieve that.
Thank you. I think we are running out of time. People are already contacting me. We are actually kind of in a speed dating, like very fast, the panels, and I hope we can get the most out of it. Thank you, Alex, so much. Thank you, everybody here. Eloise, I think you're online. You please keep online because I'm gonna ask they.
I think I'll switch links, right?
Yeah, I believe so. If you have another link for the next panel, please do. And then I'm going to call here on the stage our next speakers that we will be discussing hydrogen. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Bye, thank you.
So on the second panel, I would like to call here to the stage Lai Hansen, Special Advisor to the President and CEO Yara Ammonia. Lai, always a pleasure hearing and learning from you. Thank you. I also would like to call on the stage Thiago Silva, researcher from SINTEF, which also will be talking to us a little bit about hydrogen. And online, as I mentioned before, we will have Heloísa Borges from MEP Brazil, which also will be questioning our speakers here today. And we will also be joined online by Eduardo Munoz, CEO of Bravo Motors Company for Brazil and California. Gentlemen, thank you. What an exciting topic. I think it's like we say in Portuguese, a bola da vez, like it's the topic of the moment when we're discussing energy transition. Everybody's commenting a lot about hydrogen. So Lai, I will start with you. could you please tell us a little bit about how IATA sees hydrogen as an option for decarbonizing industries, its opportunities, and please enlighten us all a little bit about clean ammonia efforts that you've been carrying out in IATA.
Thanks, Raquel. Thanks for having me here. I first want to pay respect for the gauchos in Brazil. My hometown and surroundings is flooded with an unprecedented disaster. Yeah. 150 people dead, over 100 missing. State of Rio Grande do Sul is the size of Norway approximately. Yeah. 70% of the municipalities affected, whole cities washed away, 2 million people affected. So our respect for
indeed.
Hydrogen has always been there. Hydrogen is now, we talk a lot about hydrogen economy, but hydrogen has always been there. The difference is now we are talking about hydrogen produced with what the folks were talking before, with electricity, which is basically the only way or one of the few ways we can produce green hydrogen, and that's why we talk so much about the hydrogen economy. Now, and it's coupled with ammonia, and we'll come to that, as hydrogen is seen as then the natural vehicle for abating in hard-to-abate industry, especially like fertilizer, which is the business we are in, like the metal, and many other industries. And that is great, the opportunities in hydrogen. I think so. The first is that hydrogen would then just greening the hydrogen, and hydrogen continue to play its role in industry where it's today already playing. But then it's the new applications, and I think the biggest one is probably in transport. There is several modes of transport, especially the heavy duty, long distances, and could even be also on the maritime sector and aviation as well. But then it's also another aspect where potentially hydrogen could play a role, which is, it was mentioned before here, when we convert to electricity and green energy. I think one of the biggest challenges, we will come to that, but is the intermittence, because you will have wind and sun when God wants us to have it. And that might not be in the exact moment, in the exact place where we need it. So putting that together and stabilize the grids, for instance, and having kind of a 24/7 supply, I think that is going to be one of the big challenges. So hydrogen can also play a role in that install.
As a carrier, yeah. And it's good that you're mentioning some of the challenges that we are going to bring back to that, because I would like to call Eduardo Munhoz, that will be joining from Brazil. Eduardo is the CEO of Bravo Motors, as I mentioned, and in Brazil, he's one of the greatest critics of hydrogen and the using vehicles. And I'm keen on hearing from him, how does he see some of the opportunities? And then, since you already mentioned some of the challenges, maybe he could also comment and share his views on challenges as well. Let's see if technology will help. Yes. Hello, Eduardo. Bom dia.
Good afternoon for you, I guess.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we have a long experience researching and developing zero emissions environment, decarbonizing. In energy, an important concept in energy is that we don't create energy, we just, right? So at the end, the key factor is conversion rate. So, and uses. I don't say hydrogen is bad. It's good for certain uses. For others, already proven not efficient because of the very poor conversion. So we've been researching and adding hydrogen created almost 15 years ago. Nobody used it. And the reason is inefficiency, the transportation and moving stuff. So it's funny because what I hear now for example, here in Brazil, around hydrogen, what we heard 12, 13 years ago in the US, and already proven wrong. And that's what worries me, is we don't have adequate use.
So you're basically...
You ask me,
sorry, so you're basically mentioning on the technological constraints that we touched base on the other panel as well. So one of the key aspects when it comes to some usage in specifically, you mean in the use of vehicles in cars, because you were mentioning...
Yeah, vehicles in general. What I can say is if you're looking for concentrating energy into less matter and use it as a source for agriculture, okay, I'm into that. If you're, for example, ammonia and other products, but if you are looking forward to have high temperature, source that into industries, but if you produce it and use it in the same place, I'm okay with it. If you are thinking on producing hydrogen somewhere, or the extreme of the world, well, I'm against that, but mainly not because only the efficiencies, also because leaks, and you're getting more pollution that we're trying to prevent.
Lai, do you want to pick up on that? Sorry, do you want to pick up on that?
I saw Eloisa's faces, so...
I want to pick up on that.
Please do, because sorry, Eloisa, because you're not sharing the screen here, so I don't see you. But please, I know he does, so please jump in.
No, it's just that two things we must keep in mind. And the first thing is hydrogen is not a primary source of energy. So I think what Eduardo is trying to say is that you have to get a primary source, convert into hydrogen, and then use it. And then, first of all, we have to think if that makes sense. So for some applications, it might actually make sense. For others, no. So I think one of the challenges I would like to propose is it a silver bullet? Because it doesn't seem like a silver bullet. There's a lot of hypes, and for some sectors, there might be a hope for hydrogen. I think that's his point. There are some applications, and those are important. Those are part of the energy transition challenge that we are all trying to equate. But at the end of the day, you have to think from an engineering point of view, efficiency point of view. Does it make sense? Or do we have an alternate solution? In the Brazilian energy planning, what we are trying to understand is which are the sectors where hydrogen actually makes sense, and which are the ones where we do have better alternative solutions. And that answer is different from each country, because if you do not have a primary energy source, if you do not have resources, then you're facing a specific challenge. If you have alternative resources, it's a whole different problem. So the answer might be different. And I think what Eduardo was trying to say is it might not make sense for every country, for every industry. It might make sense for some. And maybe that's what we should be discussing, right?
Lai, any thoughts, reflections?
No, I couldn't
as
agree.
Always, women are more executive and clear men, so she actually nailed it.
Thank you. Lai, reflections on this?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's not one size fits all. It needs to be country specific. We need to. I mean, Brazil has fantastic solutions for the cars. It's been looked at, which doesn't need to be through hydrogen directly. When we, in order to produce hydrogen, we need electricity. Well, can we fix it with electricity? Do we need to go to hydrogen? But there is a bigger problem that if you take Europe, for example, Europe will be short on energy and renewable energy. and it will be produced somewhere else in the world to help Europe. How do you get that hydrogen to Europe? So first you have to convert from electricity to hydrogen, then you have to convert it to ammonia. Ammonia as a carrier, because the hydrogen was also mentioned here. You need to cool it down to minus 250 degrees to liquefy it and be able to transport it and store it. So it's a high toll to get. And then if you want to use it as a hydrogen on the other end, you need to crack it back to hydrogen from ammonia. Well, can you use them from ammonia directly at that endpoint? So there is not one size fits all. It needs an holistic approach per country, per industry, and technology maturity in different places of the world and distances, grids. It's several aspects that need to be taken into consideration.
That's a very good point that I think that you, Thiago, maybe you want to question and comment on, right?
Yes, definitely. I think my initial question, in a way, that I had in mind was connected to what was already mentioned. That is like there is no one solution for all the countries, all the problems. We know that, and I think we need to dive a little bit that hydrogen, we speak, is one thing, but there are many different, technologies. So you can make hydrogen out of green purely electricity, or you can use natural gas, you can capture this natural gas. So there are many options, and you can use a carrier, you can use ammonia to transfer, to transport it. And I think my main question here is like, how do you see, in a way, the kind of the de-risking, or in a way, how the research and how the pilots could try to bring these solutions and test the solutions before bringing to market? And I ask these questions to these two different countries, to Norway. That is like we have these hard-to-abate sectors, as you said. We need hydrogen in many cases, like for glass, not glass, but aluminum production and other, in Europe as well, but for heavy-duty transport. And this is one thing, right? But maybe for Brazil, there are is another reality. And I want you to comment a bit on that. How do you foresee this, how the pilots and the testing of these different technologies could bring these solutions into the market, and
So how science can assist scaling up technology maybe later.
Yeah. Summarizing.
Yeah, we are in a rush against time here, but was mentioned before, one of the problems is technology maturity. This is all new. We have built this world based on fossil fuel, and now suddenly we are realized that we need to change and change fast, but there is no silver bullet to fix it. And then we need to act fast. But before I go into that, also bring another element. We might have to, we talk a lot about green, but we know that it's a very big jump to green the world. Maybe we need to go blue first, which is an easier step. And it's a good enough transition period while we learn and fix it for good for the long term. And when it comes to the pilots, yes, we are seeing that I can give 2 examples. We have here in Porsgrunn, here in Norway, we are activating 20,000 tons per year ammonia plant based on PPAs, on electricity. That will be the first of its kind in the world to produce green ammonia. And 20,000 tons, that's a very small scale. This plant, the plant in Porsgrunn, is an 800,000 tons plant. We are going to produce 20,000 per year. And it's immense challenges to do this, the whole concept from the PPAs and get the electricity and all that, and the electrolysis and the cost and the markets and the logistics and so on. We are doing the same in Brazil, then based on biomethane, converting a part of an ammonia plant also into green based on biomethane. And it's the same. So those pilots are desperately needed, but we might have to jump a bit in the water and bring different brains together to accelerate a little bit, because we don't have so much time, and everything takes a lot of time.
Eduardo, reflections?
Well, I'm a bit worried when I hear there are things that we can't really. There are things that are what they are. And hydrogen is not new. There's nothing new about hydrogen. We're talking about over 25 years. Period. So there are certain things that we already proved it doesn't work for that. I mean, that's why I really agree with Eloise, approach. We need to have a look and make a very profound and assertive analysis of what is this technology, and it's not for sure for everything. So in relation to transportation, I mean, we already proven it doesn't work.
For in your case for vehicles, right? Because like here, Yara has.
And not even in long haul trucks. I mean, it's already proven on long haul trucks. If you see what long haul trucks are today, and compare how many hydrogen do you have and how many electric, you'll see what the technological route is.
Yeah.
And how the efficiency cost, because at the end somebody will pay for this, right? So it needs to make sense, not only in efficiency but also cost.
Yeah, you're mentioning. Sorry to interrupt.
And we make two relative things and say, maybe we go blue. Whoa, wait a minute. No, we don't have time to go blue and then go green.
You wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to pick up because I feel like, maybe you have a suggestion or something in mind that you, as another alternative instead of hydrogen for this heavy duty transport or hard to abate sectors. What do you have in mind that would be a good solution in Brazil?
Well, there are thousands of trucks.
Biofuels.
or when you need a range extensor, a ethanol fuel with a stationary generator on board. Why not? I mean, that makes sense, for sure.
Eloisa, you want to jump in, please?
Yes, I would like to point out back to the technological agnostic point of view. We do have biofuels and lots of the and most people do not realize that maybe you do not need to go ammonia and change all your motors. You could embed, if you get competitive enough, you could embed hydrogen into advanced biofuels or synthetic fuels. And synthetic fuels are actually carbon neutral. So we could use low carbon hydrogen to produce synthetic fuels, but then again, we go back to the cost. And at some point, we have to acknowledge that what we are trying to do, again, is scale up a technology. There's lots of challenges in that, and try to scale down costs. And disruption might come from where we do not see. So within the hydrogen economy, I think it's very important to keep an open mind, because probably, maybe, the disruption or the main solution will come from where we do not expect. And if you choose solutions or technologies in advance, you might just miss that. And we have lots of cases of disruptions where you just miss, you do not see something happening. I do believe hydrogen might be a game changer. I'm just not sure if it's going to be where people believe it's, and that goes to the point of, do we need to subsidize some choices or some applications, or should we just let science shows us the way?
Where do you see, Eloisa, the most applications? If you're agnostic against, because I get it from vehicles and cars with the RenovaBio and all the programs and Combustível do Futuro in Brazil, where do you see more Any sectors in particular? Because when we see here, the IATA here is showcasing us like with the effort that you've been doing with clean ammonia in shipping, for instance, and the partnerships that you've been establishing, it's been significant. Would you, any comments, Lai or?
Precisely because of that, precisely because of an agnostic perspective on energy planning, we have to keep our options open. So low carbon hydrogen and green ammonia in shipping is great. It's a challenge for the entire world. But if we look at like actual shipping buying on actually how much ships are being ordered in alternative fuels, as we say, we just did the accounting, like only 30% of worldwide shipping orders or the people are actually buying ships, only 30% is alternative motors, alternative kinds of propel shipping. And more than half of that is actually natural gas. The second largest orders are hybrids. Very few ships are being actually bought on green ammonia and hydrogen. So we have to think about ports. We have to think about demand, on how do we actually build a roadmap for those ships to actually be built. Because if people are not buying ammonia ships, then we have a problem with our strategy. So we have to do more in order to organize. And for Brazil, actually, because that's international transportation, and it's a great opportunity for Brazil, but for Brazil, our net zero scenarios show more hydrogen embedded in synthetic fuels and advanced biofuels than actually ammonia.
Yes,
but
I have. Sorry, thank you. Thiago, do you want to say the last remarks?
Yes, sure. I think it was. Thank you so much for enlightening us on this. I think my understanding from all of this that of course there is no silver bullet, and also different solutions, they might work together, right? So as you said before, that's even more important for knowledge transfer and to this collaboration that's happening right now, right here. That is like, countries have different realities and different value chains and different constraints. And I guess understanding these and sharing the knowledge and the technology specifically, this is very important. So I do see that, as you said, maybe hydrogen purely is not solving the problem, but combined with a battery and with other energy carriers can be a way to go.
Lai, any final remarks?
Now, let's not forget biomethane in Brazil. I know there is a panel on that. I think Brazil has a unique position in biomethane in the world. So that's a blessing for Brazil on top of all the opportunities Brazil have. I think God has put on the resources where they are, and the consumptions are where they are. And Brazil is blessed to have
all this
the all combination and putting them all together. So I think we have, I think what in the beginning somewhat said, that is the technology, is the economy, is the regulation, and is the behavior. And I think that's spot on. Those are the challenges we need to deal with. Ultimately, what we need to do is to bring that all together, and the society will play a role pushing for it. The companies will do some bets. Someone will pay some premium for it. Some penalties will be put on, but the governments also need to play a role in making this happen, because it's this difficulty of kicking it up, of getting the scale that leads to technology leads to more scale, to cheaper cost, and so on. So we need to get it going, and putting that all together, it's a bit the puzzle we have today. But I think Brazil has a unique position to help, not just internally in Brazil, but also to green the globe in a way.
Very good. Well, we did an amazing thing. We are on time. So I wanna thank you all. We have now, I invite you all to go outside and have a 15 minutes break before we join for the third, fourth panel and the closing session. I want to thank for all of those online joining us. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next panel, Eloisa. And Lai, thank you so much, and Thiago as well. Thanks for your contributions. Hello. Yes, and welcome back, everyone. We are now here continuing with our panel today on with our seminar on energy transition. And now we're going to be starting the third panel, who will be addressing the technology of carbon capture. And joining here us on the stage, I would like to call Lars Haga, Head of Supply Chain from Aker Carbon Capture. A pleasure to have you here with us today. And Thiago Silva, from SINTEF, please join us again. Online, we will be joined by Cláudio Marcosiglio, Carbon Capture and Storage Manager from Petrobras. Eloisa Borges, that was with us before. Thank you, Eloisa, for being there. Very good. So we will be discussing, as in the other panels, we would like to address before the opportunities on this technology. So Lars, if you could please kick off.
Yes, so carbon capture is obviously one of the technologies that are needed in the future to create the green shift that's needed. All of the scenarios going forwards, they require carbon capture and permanent storage as part of the solution. And especially around the hard-to-abate industries, that's the industries where carbon capture is actually needed in order to continue producing the goods we are currently in need of in the world. Carbon capture plays a significant role in getting those industries to continue, so we don't need to change out goods that we are currently using. For instance, cement has quite a significant CO2 emission in itself, and we're actually building a carbon capture plant related to cement in Norway at the moment with Aker Carbon Capture's technology. And in addition to that, carbon capture also plays a significant role when it comes to getting net negative emissions. For instance, by using bioenergy with carbon capture, you can actually get CO2 out of circulation as an additional contribution when you can't get rid of all the CO2 that's in the atmosphere coming out of all the energy and the different sources that we are using to distribute CO2.
Very good. On this, I would jump to Cláudio. Cláudio, your views on main opportunities, like maybe on the reality of Brazil?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I think CCUS can be viewed as an intriguing antithesis of traditional oil and gas production. Maybe oversimplified the view, but it's an analogy very valuable. If you consider the conventional process of production oil, initially we identify our reservoirs through geological studies, geophysical investigation, drilling or appraisal wells. Then we assess the reservoir capacity in terms of reserve and productivity using petrophysical data. Subsequently, the engineering team devises and implements the oil field development plan, and they start the operation. The extracted oil is transported via pipelines, ships to refiners, where processing plants separate fractions and produce the petroleum fuels. That's the whole value chain of the oil industry. In CCUS projects, we employ techniques akin to those used in mapping and characterize oil fields to assess reservoirs for storage. Our focus shifts from determining hydrocarbon reserves to identify CO2 storage capacity, applying similar models and simulators. And then CO2 stream to be permanently stored that comes from an industrial source. It is to undergo separation and purification in dedicated processing plants before being transported via pipelines or ships to the injection wells. What does this similarity imply? What is the opportunity here? It indicates that professionals from the oil and gas industry, geologists, geophysicists, petroleum engineering, reservoir engineering, pipeline, drilling engineering, process engineering, and much more, can transition to work on CCS projects without a lot of effort. Essentially, Raquel, the skills and competence are already in place, are already in our grasp. This presents a remarkable opportunity, leveraging our expertise and competence to decarbonize operation of various industries.
Very good. I think, Lars, do you want to pick up on that? Because here in Norway, if I'm not mistaken, you do that already. You do carbon capture storage, and we it's a common thing. Whilst in Brazil, that's not the case. So.
Yeah, so we are still, call it, at the verge of starting up, but basically I think the government has done a good job building, call it the pilot scene, through the Longship project, focusing on both the storage of CO2 and the carbon capture plants. So basically the way of doing it has been settled and is ready. There's some need for more scale, I would say.
Yeah, and then I give you the cue.
Yes. I think it was a good introduction. As was said, having the personnel and the skills that can be, transferred from one domain to the other, this is very helpful. But of course, if you think about oil production, then you have all the costs, right? Like exploration and drilling and all that, and then at some point you produce something that has a really high aggregated value, right? Which pays for the whole bill. And then this is still not the case, I guess, for CCS. So, I mean, I want to shift the attention to maybe the barriers in terms of cost. How do you see, the financing issues and what policies could, foster this?
Yes. So when it comes to the cost element and call it development, obviously there must be a business benefit in avoiding pollution by emitting CO2. So there's basically two different elements that are currently being used. One is to fund the pilot projects, both for the development phase and for the operational phase. That's typically the way that it's being done in Europe at the moment, is that there is a selection of pilot projects which are funded by the government in order to basically break the wave, we could say. And then in the US, they've basically come up with a slightly different approach. They've said, here's a tax relief. If you're able to show that you're doing the work well, you can get the money.
Yeah, and that's quite relevant. And Eloisa and Claudio, please jump in, because currently in Brazil, when we are discussing the energy transition, and I just came back from Brasilia, when you're discussing from legislators to the executive, we talk about subsidies and renewables, and everybody like, oh, please don't, not subsidies. Let's try something else. So, and see, I see the face of Eloisa now.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I want you to jump in, please, and Claudio as well from Petrobras. I want you to comment on that, because we just hear. We listen from, we just heard here from how it's done in the US and Europe, and in both cases, if we're not talking about subsidies, we're talking about incentives. And I want to hear your views.
Well, let me make one thing clear. Regarding carbon capture for us, it's very clear that it is a technology that globally we absolutely need. And if we analyze all the others that we have been discussing here, offshore wind, hydrogen is the one that we are more close to actually be competitive, to actually have a business model that can stand by itself without subsidies and without incentives. If we compare the two, offshore wind, hydrogen and carbon capture, it's the one that is closest. There are still cost challenges, still scaling challenges, but we have installed a value chain. It's true for Brazil and it's true for Norway, because most of the value chain is we can use from the oil and gas industry. But in fact, we must be very clear. In Brazil, we do not have the fiscal budget to just build up energy transition based on subsidies. Because if we give the sheer amount of subsidies that wind, solar, offshore wind, hydrogen, and carbon capture are advocating for, we do not have a budget for health, education, security, safe. So it's choices that most countries in Latin America must do. But I do believe that carbon capture is probably the one there is more near a breakthrough where we can build a standalone case model. For that, we might need not subsidies, but carbon markets. If we build up carbon markets, especially for the hard-to-abate industries, I'm fairly confident that we do have a business model for carbon capture without subsidies.
Claudio, any takes on that from Petrobras and the work that you're doing?
Yes, Cal. I think we have an opportunity. We have the ambition to develop a CCS pilot in Brazil. We are going to take CO2 from a natural processing gas in Cabiunas, Macaé, and inject in an aquifer in the north of the state. And for this pilot, we are going to use R&D money from the Brazilian Petroleum Agency. So I think it's an opportunity to start with. So we can test and can develop a lot of things before we are ready to move on to our commercial hubs. In terms of commercial hubs, I know that we don't have any kind of subsidies or incentives. We don't have a carbon market in Brazil in place yet. But I see Petrobras and many companies announcing their goal to reach net zero in 2050. And we need carbon capture and storage for that. So it's a matter of having a roadmap to develop this kind of technology. And we'll have to work together for that.
Yeah, and I just sort of to add to that, I would say that Brazil is really well positioned. There was talk about the extremely well positioning of good positioning of Brazil in the world. So basically, you have all the wells needed in order to do permanent storage. You have a lot of biomass. You're already producing a second largest producer of biofuels in the world. So basically, there's a lot in place which basically. So the path is more or less there. And if you look at the BECCS area, that's actually a global market which is willing to pay for negative credits because the CO2 emission, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It's a global problem and it needs global solutions.
Yes, Eloisa, back to you.
Sorry, Claudio mentioned a very interesting point. Maybe not everything is subsidies. R&D incentives, and Norway does that really well. It's actually a very clever way to develop a technology in order to reach commerciality. That's one point. And back to the global problem, there are very interesting studies showing the potential not only for carbon capture in the combustion sites, but actually the need for direct air capture, carbon direct air capture and storage in order for us to reach actually the net zero and for companies to compensate their scope 3 emissions. And maybe we should start talking about also the prejudice people have against carbon capture. Because that's a big challenge with the technology. There are lots of prejudice and accusations of being just carbon accountability and not actually capture and storage, and maybe we should advance on that.
You want to take on that?
I can try to. I think that's a very fair point. At least when I got involved in the first project in CCS was comments from colleagues, and I think it's of course prejudice is because the lack of knowledge, right? But once you realize those targets can only be met with the technology, and that's really important. Then I think you have two choices, and one is to keep being away. And the other one might be to, how to make it happen. And I guess R&D, making pilots and trying to, to somehow test. Although we have knowledge in producing hydrocarbons, it's not the same. There are some different constraints. And I feel like, well, there are different ways to incentivize. One is giving subsidies or incentives. But also, well, I think Europe is more on the, taxonomy side. That is more like trying to, at some point, this will cost a lot. Emitting will cost so much that there will be a business case, right? And either you plan for that or you're going to, fail in the market in a way because it's going to be so costly.
Lars, taking up on EU taxonomy.
Yes, so basically EU is now looking at, taxing the CO2 for the products at the borders of the EU. So, and as I mentioned, it's a global problem. So saying that you're just moving your emissions to another part in the world, it doesn't make sense. So this kind of thinking, I think it's going to be more and more developed. There was some talk about, call it regionalization and maybe protectionism. In a way, it's also needed in order to capture the problem which is there, which is if you're taxed on CO2 emissions in Europe, moving the factory outside shouldn't be a opportunity. That gap needs to be closed in order to make it sustainable long term, to actually work in an environmentally friendly manner. And just a quick note on the technology as well. Carbon capture technology has been present for a long time. So I think that development or further development of the carbon capture technology will definitely take us further, stepwise, maturing what we have. But I'm concerned with the speed of developing at the moment, because we have the technologies that are able to do the trick. So let's not wait more. Let's do more and rather develop as we get more and more projects realized globally. So and get the storage facilities in place, because that's really needed in order to get CO2 capture at the rate needed for all the climate reports to be fulfilled. Very good.
So you tapped all in some challenges. So you have mentioned about the skepticism against if it's that enough when we meet the 1.5. You talked about the technology that it's still needed to scale up. You talk a great deal about protectionism, and I think it's key when we are talking about EU taxonomy. Claudio and Elisa, anything else that you would like to add in terms of challenges? Because we are, like, if you compare to the previous panel, we are so much about the challenges and not as much as the opportunities. And now in this panel, we are talking so much and placing emphasis on the opportunities and not the challenges. So I want to challenge you both in highlighting any more challenges to the points that here I pinpointed.
I think a different kind of challenge, because in the previous panels, we were talking about technological challenges and cost challenges, basically. I think in carbon capture, there's a third challenge that Claudio mentioned a couple of weeks ago when he was here at EPE in an event about carbon capture. And the challenge is, it might not be as easy as we think, because the main challenge that we think we know the technology, because it's something that oil and gas industry has been doing for quite a while, dealing with gas, dealing with CO2. Existing projects are usually are projects from CO2 removal or advanced oil recovery. So it's something that we think we know how to do. And that's maybe a challenge, like we think it's too easy and then we fall behind.
Yeah. And Claudio, do you want to final remarks on that?
I was to say the same thing. I'm happy that my point touched Eloise. When our team started working with the CCUS, they were very confident. We know everything. It's easy because it's similar to our industry. But when we delve deeper, we realized that a lot of things that you have to learn about, you have to adjust, to tune, especially regarding how to characterize reservoirs, how to apply the technology that you use for our industry into a CCUS project. And especially, I think that's very important for us, how to requalify, how to repurpose existing infrastructure for CCUS. If you want to take a pipeline that used to transport gas, now we want to transport CO2, how to qualify that? So I think that's the issue, it's the challenge, and we need that to reduce the cost of the project.
I think that's a great opportunity for exchange of knowledge as well, because Norway has or is been going through all of this, right? So it can be an opportunity to showcase some of this experience in practice.
Definitely, and I really like the repurposing, as in the a little bit of a circular economy thing there. Yeah. So I really like that idea. I think that as I haven't worked on the project myself, but I think a lot of the projects in or the Northern Lights project in Norway has sort of been new build to avoid having the positioning process to basically make a problem for the first in line. But I really agree that being able to reuse all the infrastructure that's put there for oil and gas should be a target, and would definitely take down the cost of storage as well. And the storage needs are significant. Yeah. It's not going to be just a couple of wells here and there. It's going to be massive volumes that need to be filled in order to get the things out of the air.
Very good. I think we are, with that, 4 sharp, we are getting to a close to this panel. I really would like to thank all of you online again. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me here at the stage. And I will be calling up our last panel before the final session. That will be on biofuels.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. This fourth panel on biofuels, we've heard a lot about biofuels from the opening session from the Secretariat of Energy Transition itself, and along some of our speakers mentioned. So I'm going to call here to the stage Moana, from SINTEF will be joining me here on the stage, and all the other speakers will be joining us online. So I will welcome online Fábio da Silva, Deputy Superintendent from ANP, our regulator, National Agency for Petroleum, Natural Gas and Biofuels in Brazil. I will also call Elliot Barchillon. He's the trader biofuel in advanced ethanol from Raizen. Raizen, for those in Norway not aware, it's a joint venture between Shell and the Brazilian Cosan, and is currently considered one of the main companies in biofuel sectors in Brazil. And Eloisa Borges, who was with us, and it's going to be joining us again to carry on in this panel. So please, if we can have all the speakers online, that would be great. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Hello, Fábio.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon or good morning.
Yes, good morning. Bom dia para vocês and good afternoon for us. Yes.
Good afternoon.
Eloisa, pleasure having you again. Very, very nice. Thank you.
It tells me I'm not leaving the stage.
You're not leaving the stage, and I love that. It's a pleasure to count on you. And that's the whole idea of this seminar, right? That we bring experts to interact with the think tanks and the researchers to interact with the experts as well. So appreciate your contributions. I would like to kick off the debates with Fábio. Fábio, biofuels are considered key on decarbonizing transport, providing a low carbon solution to hard to abate sectors, such as trucking and aviation. I would like to know a little bit more on how Brazil sees biofuels as a key technology on energy transition. What do you see as the main opportunities?
Hi, Raquel. Firstly, thanks to BNCC for the invitation and you for the question. I see the opportunities. Brazil is one of the biggest biofuel producers in the world. We use ethanol since 1975 and biodiesel for almost 20 years. Now we use ethanol blended with gasoline and pure as an option, an alternative to gasoline. And biodiesel we use as a blend with diesel. At the moment, we are in 14% of biodiesel. In addition, we have the National Biofuels Policy, Renova Bill, that is a program in which the biofuel producers certify their production and receive grades. And after this, a kind of carbon credit called CBIO is generated and sold in the Brazilian stock exchange. Going to the international context, we see that biofuels, mainly for aviation and shipping, are a great opportunity for the next years. In this sense, it's relevant to mention a bill in the Brazilian National Congress, 528 of 2020, called Bill of the Fuel of the Future, that proposed a mandate to create a mandate for sustainable aviation fuels to be blended into the jet fuel, a mandate for biomethane to be injected into the natural gas grid, a legal framework for carbon capture and storage, in which ANP will be the only responsible by the regulation, and other incentives to use of low carbon fuels, mainly biofuels. I think it's this.
Yeah, the main thank you so much. Yeah. Which is, yes, I want, you're talking about a perspective of the agency as a regulator, and those are the main benefits that you see, and that's quite relevant. I'm quite interested on understanding from you, Elliot, about Raizen, because you trade this here in Europe. So I wanted to hear from you as a trader, how do you see this technology growing? How do you see this playing a bigger role in energy transition?
Hello, good afternoon. So thank you very much for inviting Raizen to speak to this panel.
Our pleasure.
Appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, definitely the biofuel is a very promising element of the bio transition. I think that for now it's the most available. It's a drop-in solution. It's using existing logistic. And I mean the technology is running since years and has proven to be effective. I mean, if I have like a very quite interesting stat about since the implementation of the flex fuel vehicles in Brazil. I think it was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. Fabio, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Right. That's correct.
It took out about 600 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. This is equivalent to the size of Lebanon planted in trees. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
If you look at Sao Paulo, which is one of the biggest cities in the world, I think that currently we are one of the less polluted city in the world. So, I mean, definitely, we believe in all solutions. I mean, I'm pretty sure that given the ambition of the problem, we need every solution. I don't say that one is better than the other. It's just that biofuels are the most available for the time being with existing technologies and relatively affordable costs compared to other types.
I'm seeing Eloisa with some surprised faces, so I'm picking up on you, Eloisa, in one question as well, if you can. In any particular sector that you think has more potential to adopting biofuels, and any comments on what Elliot just said?
Within transportation?
Yeah,
or
any
in
sector
general?
in general.
Well, I think biofuels are a very good solution, especially for heavy duty vehicles, because we already have the technology for light fleet vehicles. And when we talk about the challenges of critical minerals for batteries, for instance, in hybrid vehicles, we do have a solution that would require less minerals and provide from a full carbon accounting solution. Like if we could pick and choose and organize a little bit this energy transition, it's already clear that Brazil believes on biofuels for the light vehicles, and it is our main choice of decarbonization. But I think they are undervalued as a heavy transportation solution, especially for roads. Again, because there are few needs of changing the motors or changing your entire fleet at once. And for developing countries, that's very important. The sheer amount of investments that would be needed to change the fleet and provide the infrastructure if we adopt other solutions, we don't face that challenge with biofuels, especially biodiesel or HVO, for instance. So, but what I was considering in that, and that's my phase, I was listening to the other participants, and I was thinking about how do we overcome the prejudice against biofuels, especially traditional biofuels, or especially traditional biomass, because that's where most potential is. And when we talk in certain environments, especially in Europe, there tends to be a huge prejudice against traditional biomass and using traditional biomass within biofuels. And that just takes out like the low-hanging fruit of biofuels production and what we could do very quickly, very fast, in a very economical way.
I hear you nodding. Do you want to pick that up?
No, I was actually going to go like right at this point. We've been talking here about, technologies like wind offshore and hydrogen, and I remember in the hydrogen panel, Eloisa was very like, we have biofuels. So, I mean, this is an opportunity. This is a low-hanging fruit for our decarbonizing this, like shipping and heavy duty and so on. But why is it that it's such a low-hanging fruit, but it's not, but there is still so much more potential? Is it technical barriers? Is it cost barriers? Is it supply chain? Or how can we overcome? Where do we need more investments? Where do we need more research, more applied research?
Very good questions, because we're jumping into challenges. Fabio, do you want to comment a little bit on these challenges?
Oh, yes. Of course, we have the technology and cost of production. For example, sustainable aviation fuels are about 3 times more expensive than fossil jet fuel. But as a worker of ANP, the regulatory agents of Brazil, I would like to talk a little bit about the regulatory changes. Due to the fast transformation, we, the agents, need to improve our regulation very quickly. For example, in aviation, we will have the challenge after the approval of the bill that I mentioned a few minutes ago. For us, the main challenge related to the A&P will be how to harmonize the criteria of certification between renewable and the Brazilian policy for biofuels in course since 2018, and CORSIA. CORSIA is the International Aviation Decarbonization Program, and the criteria are are different. Another point, for the use of low carbon fuels in shipping, another hard to abate decarbonization, it's important to talk about the standards of quality specifications. The specifications for marine fuels needs to be updated since it still does not provide the use of biofuels blended with maritime diesel or blended to bunker. At this meantime, ANP can approve the use of blends by authorization. ANP have already authorized tests with biodiesel blended to traditional fuels, diesel or bunker. Some examples. One company tested 2%, 5%, and 7% of biodiesel in maritime diesel, and the results were okay. And other companies tested increasing blends of biodiesel in bunker, 10%, 24%, and more recently 24% of biodiesel in bunker, this time using only animal biodiesel produced with animal fat from residues. So this is the regulatory challenge.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And Elliot, and from your perspective, what do you think would be some challenges?
So I see a first challenge. I mean, I'm with Fabio on this one. Definitely, I mean, the specifications, it's a limiting factor, either to incorporate the new biofuels or to increase. For example, in Europe, I mean, E10 is quite well implemented, but not everywhere. Can we go above? I mean, in Brazil, they go to 27%. There is no problem with the cars on this. So the specification is one topic. The second one, I mean, it's definitely legislation. I mean, legislation need to incentivize demand, and in order to have good legislation and working legislations, you need to you need to incentivize long-term demand, avoid market segmentation, like Fabio was mentioning as well with the CORSIA, and try to unify the different methodologies together, and not having one country is looking at one thing, others looking at one other, and it creates misunderstanding and some barriers to the growth. So to me, it's specs and legislation bringing long-term and solutions that investors can trust in the long term for investing in these developments.
Good. Eloisa, would you or Mona would like to add into this when it comes to challenges? I think because you made both a very good point on why is that not picking up? Why is that? Do you want to share your views on these points as well? So it was mentioned regulation and legislation. But it's not. We didn't touch one of the points that here Lair summarized that was mentioned in another topic, that we are also talking about behavior, and changing of behavior, right? So, and that's a tougher one. What's your views and reflections on this, on how to take out the stigma of
Eloisa talked a little bit about the stigma of like the view of especially European countries on traditional biofuels, and if you go into the regulations in Europe, there's more and more restrictions and more demand for second generation biofuels made from feedstock that do not compete with food or with animal feed. And then there's, of course, on one side is there is a demand for these more alternative feedstocks for biofuels, but there's also, do we have all that we need for supplying this? Because the one thing is the requirements that we have here, but we also have a demand. We also have a blended biodiesel and so on in Europe, and we have a demand for biofuels. And if there is this restriction on the advanced and second generation biofuels, where's the need for, is this a need for more research, need for some changes in the supply chain, and where's the collaboration there with, for example, with Brazil, which has a big tradition and a very mature technology for biofuels?
So I'll pick up this one. So I think, I mean, the first question about the fuel versus food, I think that, I mean, this is not really a topic that I want to discuss because I think there is plenty of like divergent opinions in this. As Raizen, we do have both solutions. We have second generation, we have the first generation. We're expanding enormously in the second generation. We are producing ethanol from bagasse residues. We could adapt the technology to straw as well. There is plenty of biomass from the biomass waste from the sugar and ethanol production of the first generation. There is also other products that we can use as other components for other sectors. So there is definitely a possibility in this. I mean, it's available, the technology works. We have like the first plant that is running since 2014. We commissioned the second plant this year. We have 2 other plants that will be hopefully starting up this year. We have signed in total like nine plants of second generation ethanol offtake that will be coming online by 2027. So there is definitely solutions for here, and we will be here for whichever part is preferred. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a question of price. I mean, for sure, second generation is more expensive than first generation. It's all about what people want to adapt in their.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, at some point, it's just that for now it's scarce. You create a market and you develop this technology, and then the price holds at some point. So that's, and again, regulation important, and stable legislative landscape extremely important for developing and investing in those expensive technologies.
I think if we go from like more technological challenging options for energy transition to less, I would put probably hydrogen up there, then offshore wind, then carbon capture, advanced biofuels, and then traditional biofuels. So I think we have to understand that we are building up on but the bottom 2 for me are biofuels, and stable legislation helps a lot, but also international consensus. We talked about national regulations. I think it's very important, and Brazil thinks it's very important to build international consensus on the role of biofuels. That's why we launched last year the Global Biofuels Alliance with the United States and India, because the 3 countries are strong believers in biofuels. And what we are doing, we are actually promoting, and maybe Fabio wants to talk a little bit more about that, but under the G20, we are actually promoting a carbon accounting, or we are trying to build a carbon accounting consensus on how to do the math for biofuels, and we are advancing on studying the feedstock issue. I think it's important because if each country sees it differently, might not give enough incentives for it to be a global solution. And I would like to point out maybe a different challenge that we are facing in Brazil when consumers are faced with choices, and you mentioned that consumer behavior. Yep. There is an important role for consumer behavior. For instance, Brazil, we have ethanol as a fuel for more than 30 years now, and flex fuel motors, flex fuel engines for more than 20 years now. And what we are seeing and some policy issues that we face is, why do people do not choose ethanol? If it's cheaper, pollutes less, and makes more economic sense, why do we still see the consumer behavior tending to choose gasoline? And that's a very interesting topic that we are facing right now, because we actually did a research on trying to understand consumer behavior. Because when we are talking about biofuels and we present consumers with choices, how do we actually give the incentives for make our expected choice? It's true for, of course, you can have mandates, but how do we go beyond mandates?
Yep. Yeah, Fabio, do you want to pick up on that? That it's quite relevant. How to, change management.
Just a little bit. Eloisa said very well about the carbon accounting consensus. This is a great challenge. We have renewable, CORSIA, low carbon fuel standard in the United States, and consensus is difficult. But considering ethanol, Brazilian ethanol from sugarcane, in all of these programs, including CORSIA program for the international aviation, and with criteria of land use change, including indirect land use change, the Brazilian sugar, the roads to produce SAF from sugarcane ethanol are good. The carbon intensity are lower than other routes that produce from alcohol to jet using other feedstocks. And we have the difficult to have a consensus, but the Brazilian ethanol from sugarcane is considered with low carbon intensity in all different programs.
Good. Thank you for very insightful discussions. We are getting too close to the debate of this panel, so I would like to give a quick round. And that, because you mentioned, Eloisa, a thing that for me it's quite relevant, right? Working with communications and working with organizational development. And when we talk about changing consumer management behavior and clients, employees' behavior, that's quite challenging. And can you share some of these studies? You mentioned that you made these studies, and can you share some of the findings of why is that so?
Yes, part of it is information or disinformation, but part is a very tricky issue, because it's how does it translate? Not habits. Habits. So people just have the habit of going and choosing the same thing. So how do you change
a habit and
yes, and behavior patterns on the long term? The information is easier because and we are actually trying to work on that. Part of the behavior explained because people do not do the math. it's not only that fuels, if you do the math, most consumers, they do not take into account actually the emissions. The truth is, this debate hasn't reached the general population yet.
You mean the CO2 emissions reduction?
Yes.
You mean, yeah.
Choosing fuels or goods in general, because they have lower emissions, on average, is not part of the consumer choice.
Yeah.
So regular people do not tend to buy things based on the carbon content.
Yeah, and that's quite a relevant, and sorry, because that's quite a relevant topic, because we are on the next panel, which we'll be closing up, we are going to touch base on that. And then we are discussing here, and you mentioned sometimes like the trilemma. So when we're discussing about the energy trilemma, you're touching some of the points, like the sustainability factor. It's completely different when we are talking about Europe and we are talking about developing economies or underdeveloped economies, and it mirrors effect on the consumer behavior. So that's a quite key point. Thank you for bringing it up.
And the other thing is, if you have to do too much math, for instance, one fuel is more efficient, but the other one is cheaper, and you have to do a kind of the math in order to realize which one makes more economic sense. Again, huge companies, they might be able to do that, but small business and individual consumers, then there's this, what we call in economics, rationality issues. We do not have computers in our mind, so we do not do the math all the time. So maybe the economic incentives are not perceived again. And the third issue is just behavior. So people just tend to keep doing what they have always done.
Yeah.
And there's lots of public like information marketing strategies and lots of things that could be done to change that, but we have to realize that it will probably change through the generations. Like, it's very hard to change intergenerational behavior.
Yeah, and on that, sorry to interrupt, but on that I would like to give the final word to Elliot, because you're a trader, so you sell this. So can you actually share some of the comments on what your clients, what do they have as behaviors that actually incentivizes the technology?
So thank you for this question. I mean, I think that it's true what Eloisa just said, and I think that something needs to be also taken into account, that like difference between Brazil or Europe or developing countries and more and North countries. It's the price element in Brazil will be extremely important. You cannot ask people to take into account the CO2 emissions when even like worldwide scientists are not even agreeing in only one way to calculate it. So it's very difficult for a consumer to take it into account. So they only look at the price. So that's why I think that's the first generation biofuels for countries. Like in Brazil, it's a very good choice. You cannot ask like people in Brazil like to pay those levels that Europeans are paying. That's why I think that's like Europe has also like a really good element into bringing those economics to the market and expanding on those productions. I mean, it's when you look at the investments from like production side, we are producing from waste, right? So we are solving a problem of waste accumulation. So at some point, right, the operational expenditures for running on second generation are not so much different than running on the third generation. Capital expenditure to produce, to build a mill are the main issue. That's why you need to have stable and long-term legislation to promote investment into those, give confidence to those. Once this is amortized, then after that you end up in similar economic production, and you bring actually new additional volume to the market.
Very good, Fabio, and thank you.
Just one last thing on the second generation ethanol. From the same land use, we can produce up to 50% more ethanol. So
efficiency
basically,
as well.
I mean, we are really unlocking additional potential that was not at all used before.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for your remarks. Fabio, any concluding remarks on this topic before we close this session?
Oh, yes. I agree with my colleagues that the price is the key point for the consumer. We have seen for 40 years in Brazil. And the incentives I said about the bill that create many incentives to use low carbon fuels, especially biofuels. But I see they are necessary, of course, but we have seen a choice for the use in shipping, because this bill, we don't have mandate, we don't have initiative in this bill to use low carbon fuels in shipping, but many companies are looking for biodiesel associated with diesel, maritime diesel or bunker. So we have a way without incentives in this case, because biodiesel is considered a drop-in fuel in shipping, and we have a great production. At the moment, we have the capacity for producing biodiesel more than 13 billion liters a year. So we need to continue this politicians for incentive to incentives, but we have other opportunities also. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eloisa, thank you so much for being with us throughout this seminar today. I do say that with those final concluding remarks, I wanted to ask another question, but I won't, because our last panel, because we are talking about not doing incentives to one sort of technologies, but now saying to another ones to keep incentives. That's a quite relevant debate there, but I won't be taking that today. But thank you so much for being here with us. And on that, I would like to call out to this stage our final and concluding remarks for the day. Thank you all here for this session.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Eloisa. It's been great having you throughout the event.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Very good. So I would like to call here on the stage for our roundtable. So this final concluding remarks, we're also going to be in hybrid. So we are going to have people here and people joining us online. And I will call up to the stage now before we jump into the discussions, we're going to watch a brief video. But please, Jon Hansen, Head of Energy Scenario Research from Rystad Energy, please join me here on the stage. I also would like to call Sverre Alvik again back to the stage so we can finalize. Please, gentlemen, take a seat. And online, we will be joined by Letícia Andrade, VP Onshore Renewables, Equinor Brazil, Dominic Engler, online senior economist from the World Bank. But before we start and we join our colleagues online, I would ask all of you to take a moment to watch a video that was shared with us by the World Economic Forum. And it's basically a call for action that summarizes very much what we'll be discussing here today.
Energy is the lifeblood of economy. Everything moves and everything is transmitted thanks to energy. We remember the importance of energy when we have a scarcity of it. An energy crisis is an opportunity to do a step change. There is no time to lose. The energy transition does need to be accelerated. And so we should really use this opportunity to go ahead and decarbonize the energy system and also make energy system more resilient, secure, and affordable for everyone. The energy system that we have built over decades is unfortunately very heavy in emission. So we have now to transform it while we run it. So it's like fixing a plane while you are on it and you're flying. So that's one part of it. It's a very big system that needs to be transformed. And of course, we also live in a world that is no more a world of abundance as it was in the past, but is a world of a bit more of scarcity. We need a lot of investment. We need a lot of technology innovation, and we need to apply the innovation that are here. But above all, we need to understand that energy is not only about supply. Many people talk about fossil fuel versus renewable. That is an important part of the debate. But we have to talk also a lot about, or to work a lot, on the demand side. Because if we lower the demand, we'll need less energy supply. How we address efficiency and the demand side is really critical to this energy transition. What we are trying to achieve is really look at bringing together experts in the field of the energy transition and bring different perspective, multi-stakeholder perspective to how we address the energy transition from the multiple opportunities that are included in it. We have to team up. We have to do it together. Let's not try to prevail on one side or the other side. Let's not be ideological. Let's try to find solutions that really give humanity an energy system that is helpful for the development and also is sustainable with the environment. I think the good news at the moment is we understand what is the problem, and we have great minds and a lot of capital that is available to solve this problem, but we shouldn't be complacent. Everyone needs to have safe and reliable energy access.
Very good, and we thank WEF for sending that to us here today. So now we'll be joined online, and I hope that our speakers are there. Yes, Leticia, thank you so much for being here with us today. Dominique as well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to count with all of you. And the dynamics here, again, I'm under pressure. We have half an hour to close the debate and hear from all the speakers here on the stage. And while doing so, we came up with one question. So it's going to be one question that I would like all of you to touch base on. And the questions is, we all know the targets. We know also about the challenges of the energy trilemma. What is feasible from ambition to reality? You start.
Yeah, thanks for having me in the panel. No, so first, I think it's very interesting with energy trilemma when it comes to countries like Brazil and Norway, because both the countries are in a very unique situation to tackle these challenges of balancing reliable, affordable, and clean energy. So some of the debates that we had here today has been very much focused on other things than cleaning up the power sector, because that's already sort of been done both in Norway and in Brazil. So we're starting to look at other sectors. And looking at, for example, other countries than Norway and Brazil, they're still cleaning up the power sector. So we're still sort of in the lead on the energy transition. But what we have done at Rystad, particularly since the energy crisis, has been to ask ourselves the question if the energy trilemma is still relevant in the world that we're currently living in. And we have come to the conclusion that you probably need to add a fourth dimension to this energy trilemma in order to actually capture all these dynamics that are playing out. And we're calling that sovereign energy. And sovereign energy is about how you attract local investments. It's about how you are becoming technology leader within a field. It's really about how to win this net zero race. And this is something which is a very, very sharp shift from where we have been over the last years, because the focus here now is of course a lot on this driven by the US-China sort of dimension, but it's also driven by this enormous opportunity that's there with energy transition. And this is something that we've seen in both Norway and Brazil in the past, because this is very much looking like what we know as local content requirements in the oil and gas industry. We've seen it in the wind industry, for example. And this is an opportunity space now where we need to sort of rethink what we economists think about when we think about sort of efficient policies. So this is a huge opportunity for Norway and for Brazil in order to think about what the opportunities are in the future. And that's a little bit untraditional in the way we have been seeing. And of course, this throws in additional complexity in the way we are thinking of. So all of you here are probably interested in the energy sector from one angle or the other. So you need to take a step back and you need to think about sort of what does this mean? What are the so what's for me and my business in order to sort of win and sort of expand the business opportunities? Because in some cases it's sort of creating additional costs, but in some cases also it's a more level playing field and a lot of opportunities there.
Okay, so that's a quite interesting concept, and correct me if I'm wrong. So you're talking about sovereign energy, meaning like take a look a little bit more of what do I produce well and what's relevant for me. So taking a look of more of a protectionist approach towards how can I excel. Hold that thought. I'm gonna, so that for you would be your quick 5 cents on what's feasible from ambition to reality. I wanna now invite Leticia to jump in. Leticia, ambition to reality. What do you think as the responsible for onshore renewables for Equinor in Brazil? Can you hear us? We can't hear you. No? Not a problem. Meanwhile, you try your audio. I can switch back to Dominique. Dominique, meanwhile, can you jump in and share with us what would be your views when it comes to ambition to reality?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me better?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, that's excellent. No, thank you so much for the invitation. Realism. So basically, the simple question is, am I an optimist or am I a pessimist? And I would say I'm a natural optimist. Or let's say I'm an optimist with a good degree of realism. This is what I would call it. And I've been able to follow the webinar only kind of here and there, a little bit due to conflicting commitments. But I've heard bits and pieces here, and I would like to emphasize some of them. And I would like to emphasize them in the following, in the 3-1-3 structure, because I think that very often we talk about 3 alleged risks, but we should actually talk about 1 real risk only. And there are 3 risk mitigation strategies that we can apply in order to tackle this real risk. What are the 3 real alleged risks that have come up in all the discussions? And why do I call them alleged risks? There is, first of all, technologies. And very often we say the technologies are not mature and they are not there and we don't know where they will come from and so on. We at the World Bank, we are also concerned about this. But this is why we very often talk to a lot of market players. And just recently I've spoken with Wärtsilä again. I've spoken with MAN. I've spoken with WindGD and so on. And they all give me comfort that the engines, be it a hydrogen engine, be it an ammonia engine, the methanol engine, and so on, all what we need is coming. It is kind of, they are testing it, they are rolling it out, and it actually works much better than we think. What we need for some of the fuels, like biofuels, it's not rocket science. We know how to produce hydrogen-based fuels, electrolyzers, Haber-Bosch for ammonia, and so on. All that is not rocket science. This is all technologies with technology readiness levels of 8, 9 or so. So it's not something that we need to start from scratch. Therefore, I would call them technologies an alleged risk. What is the second alleged risk? Very often we hear that the renewable energy potential, the resources are not as big as they are needed. So therefore, we will never be able kind of to produce all the renewable energy that will be needed. There's a report, a very interesting report by IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency from 2022 that compares the 2050 outlook of hydrogen-based fuels produced at $2 or less than $2 per kilogram, which is actually competitive with fossil fuels nowadays for different regions. And it says for all regions with varying degrees, but for all regions, the expected consumption, the expected demand is much less than the expected supply that can be produced at these low costs. For Europe, the factor is kind of demand to pessimistic, and these are pessimistic scenarios. Supply is 1 to 5. For Northeast Asia, it's 1 to 15. But when you look into Africa, and once again, the realistic demand compared with the pessimistic supply scenario is 1 to 700. If you go into the optimistic scenario, it's 1 to 2,000. So 2,000 times more hydrogen could be produced that is realistically going to be consumed in 2050 in these regions. So I also don't consider this kind of to be a real risk. And then the last risk that I would call an alleged risk is the finance risk, where we always say we don't have the money is not available to finance the energy transition in shipping or in other sectors. The money is available, absolutely. The money is just being spent on the wrong ticket items at the moment. In 2022, the IMF has calculated that fossil fuel subsidies still amounted to $7 trillion, and that's about 7% of the global GDP. If we took along that money that currently goes into fossil fuel subsidies and invested it into the hydrogen-based fuels, into the biofuels, or whatever, into the technologies that are needed to decarbonize shipping, we would have no problem, neither in shipping nor in aviation nor in any other sector to decarbonize these. Let me now come from these three alleged risks to the real risk. And the real risk is really regulatory uncertainty. And the regulatory uncertainty that we really have, at the moment is leading to the traditional chicken and egg dilemma. The ship owners, the charterers, nobody's investing into the zero carbon vessels because the zero carbon fuels are not there. And the zero carbon fuel producers are not investing into the supply because they say kind of, where are the ships, where are the vessels that are going to consume these? And that is also confirmed by a World Bank report that was published by my energy colleagues a year ago when they asked the hydrogen developers, what is the key risk that you are actually afraid of in terms of developing your hydrogen-based fuels supply? And they kind of overwhelmingly stated with the off-taker risk. We know that people are interested in it, but people are reluctant to enter off-take agreements with us because they don't know how the regulation is going to develop. And that is actually something that we can really influence ourselves, not each of us alone, but we together, each of us individually, through a great global regulator that we have, that is the International Maritime Organization, we can create the regulatory framework that really kind of helps this market to take off. Now, this real risk, regulatory uncertainty, how can we mitigate it? What can we do really in order to tackle it? And I think we've got three main mitigation strategies that we can pursue in the very short term and in the short term and the medium term. I would say in the very short term, there is a couple of no regret options. No regret options is energy efficiency in shipping. This is wind assistance, this is air lubrication, this is operational efficiency, all that stuff. Pursue it because it's going to benefit you, it's going to bring down greenhouse gas emissions, it's going to bring down fuel consumption, regardless of whether you run your ship on very low sulfur fuel oil or whether you do it on hydrogen-based fuels or biofuels in the fuel cells. The same kind of, when you get a new ship, go for dual fuel engines that give you the reassurance, the comfort to run your ship on various fuels, regardless of however the fuel landscape is going to play out. So that is really go for these no regret options. The second is really start now with with the pre-feasibility studies, the feasibility studies, kind of all the design and so on for the fuel supply. And the World Bank is doing this in a lot of countries. I personally, with my team, I'm involved in kind of bringing green shipping supply in Colombia, in Morocco, in South Africa. Panama has approached us. And we actually have a very interesting project in Brazil, in the state of Ceará. The port of Pecém is working with us, has already kind of gotten the first loan from the World Bank, over $135 million, to really kickstart the fuel supply there. And the third point that I want to make is we have to tackle the regulatory uncertainty. We really have to make sure that we get a stringent policy framework in place. Stringent means robust and ambitious at the same time, something really that all market players can rely on over the next decades to come. The IMO is working on it. They are developing the fuel standard. They are developing a market-based measure, an economic measure that is basically a carbon price. And if we get this right, then I'm really not worried that we can make this energy transition in shipping a reality over the coming years.
Thank you, Dominic. There was a comprehensive answer, and I appreciate that on your 3-1-3 strategy. Thank you so much. I think, Letícia, we have you now. I think you changed devices, and I believe that we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So again,
I'm sorry for that, Raquel.
Not a problem. So again, what is feasible from ambition to reality when it comes to energy transition?
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. And every time I think about energy transition, I wonder whether we should be patiently impatient or impatiently patient. And we need to understand that the transition will not be linear, and we need to adapt with market realities and risks and opportunities. And I think it's quite important that we acknowledge and keep reminding ourselves about the energy trilemma, right? We need the affordability at the same time that we need the decarbonization, and the world needs energy now. And I think that's quite important for us to bear that in mind on this ambition to action. And we have you have discussed throughout the day there some what I would say brakes and accelerators to the energy transition. And an obvious brake is obviously cost, as it has been discussed there, also acknowledging that the realities of the countries is different. So what works in Norway not necessarily will work in Brazil or in Japan or in India. So it's quite important that we understand that. And also when it comes to the maturity of some technologies, as we discussed, for example, the carbon capture, we are doing quite a lot from the Equinor side around the globe, and we haven't been able to do CCS in Brazil yet. So I think it's quite important that we understand that. And there is also, as a break, I think there is still a misunderstanding from some parts around the globe on the role of fossil fuels. And we understand the world still needs oil and gas, and then it's the matter is it's how we are able to continue producing that with minimal emissions. And we do have good examples on that. And then on the accelerators, and this has also been discussed today, we strongly believe that the collaboration is key. The international collaboration is key. If each country does this task separately, it will be uneven and very inefficient. And Louisa just mentioned that as an example. So it's very important that we have a mechanism around the globe that drive consistently the carbon reductions. I also believe that it is, as we said, a transition is not a switch. We need to acknowledge it is complex, it is costly, and this collaboration among governments, companies, consumers, and the civil society is quite important. And then I just wanted to also highlight the relevance of Brazil in the global arena, and especially in the energy transition, now materialized by the G20 this year, and COP30 in Belém, in Brazil, in also later on the year. And we are very proud and contribute to Brazil's ambitions for a fair energy transition.
Thank you so
much.
much.
I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And I think, I think you sum up really well. We are talking about transition and not a switch. And as we saw in the video from the World Bank, we need to team up. So, okay, now Sveta, you open up, and now you're closing off our debates today. So, what do you think that it's feasible?
Thank you, Rachel. I think feasible and possible are two different things. That's one of the things that DNV is trying to focus when we publish our energy transition outlook, which focuses on what we think is likely. So, for example, it's fully feasible. It's fully possible to phase out fossil fuel subsidies, but it's probably not feasible. Is the glass half full or is it half empty? I think the glass is half full from a technology perspective, and it's half empty or fully empty from a climate perspective. And that is something we need to think of. The climate problem is global. So on a global level, DNV think that we are on our way towards a 2.2 degree future, not the 1.5 degree future. But let's focus on Brazil. I think what we have heard here today is that there are multiple priorities in the Brazilian governments. There are some technologies which already have started. Solar is fully on its way with a rapid uptake in Brazil. That passed 40 gigawatt installed this summer maybe in Brazil. EV batteries, EVs is now starting. Traditional biofuel, we heard, is well underway, and Brazil is leading. Many of the other technologies we heard today, they are in the starting blocks or have not yet reached the starting blocks. And I think for those technologies to scale, it's still a very long way to go in Brazil. As we heard, it's about willingness to pay, affordability, priorities, a just transition, regulatory challenges, and others. So there is a long way to go for many of these technologies. And Brazil is a middle-income country, which are likely to lag in development, awaiting cost reduction coming from high-income countries and China developing and helping the technologies to scale, and that takes time. So it is a complex picture. Brazil also has a pledge of carbon neutrality by 2050. At the moment, it's very hard to see that they can get there unless with dramatic turnaround of the land use changes. But from the energy system as such, it's not likely that Brazil will be on a net zero by 2050 trajectory. That still means there is a lot of opportunities in all the technologies we heard today in Brazil. And that you cannot reach the global 1.5 degree option shouldn't be any obstacle for getting as close as possible. And in there, Brazil has an extremely important role to play.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. Before we right on time, 5, I think that some of the speakers need to be leaving here on time as well. But before we close the session and the day today, I would like to call to the stage Øgtun, our BNCC chairman, to give a big thank you for all of you who contributed online in all over Brazil and the world, some places, and here as well for everybody who is accompanying here to us. Oh, please, I will get your... Sorry.
Thank you.
Please.
Raquel. Well, first of all, I hope you enjoyed attending as much as we enjoyed putting this together. And before we head out, I would just convey my appreciations to everyone. The amount of information and the quality of contributions were amazing. But I also appreciate that we could use the word science and realism. We have walked a long way from sort of wokeness to be able to discuss this openly without having, how should I say, biased opinions. So there's a few takeaways that I really appreciated. The concept of low-hanging fruits. Finally, why don't we make the easy option, which I think we are presented here? You know, we have, as far as I read the other day, actually, there are about 70 industrial complexes and corporates who is responsible for almost 90% of the pollution. If that is true or not, but you know, that is a truly long-hanging fruit. The same goes for shipping, and shipping is my industry, of course, but what I think was amazing now that we can trust the biofuel. We actually had our first bunkering yesterday with biofuel B30, and by that we have reduced the emission of that ship by 40%. Another low-hanging fruit. So it's also the other concept I appreciate. There's no shoe fitting all sizes, and we have to create a value chain that makes the cost carried by the right source, and this we are not there yet. But anyway, on behalf of Innovation Norway, the Brazil-Norway Chamber, we hope we made your time worthwhile, and I think that we maybe should ponder over a new project where we not only say science and realism, but also science, realism, and smartness. Because we have to make the value chain pay for the initiatives and the cost and investments necessary. Last but not least, Lars Bendik, are you here? Thanking you for hosting us here today. Without your support, we had obviously to downsize this considerably. But I see we had a full house more or less, and I don't know how many is on the net. But from BNCC and Innovation Norway, thank you for attending, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here with us. And again, thank you.
I would like to forgot to compliment you for your moderation.
Yes, thank you.
As always,
pleasure.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks, Ogu. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the day today. I hope, like Ogu said, it was useful. And we invite everybody for some networking here outside. And also, all of the people who joined us online told us that they would be willing to, if you want to reach out to them, please let us know and we can make that happen. And again, for those speakers who are here today with us, tusen tack. Obrigada.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the drink.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you, Letícia. Obrigada. Boa tarde.
Bye-bye.